So you see no solution in the mind, even those people who are not that much aligned with Netanyahu and like Naftali Bennett. Your take on what's going on?
Well, first of all, we need to understand that the European recognition of a Palestinian state doesn't advance the cause of Palestine at all. Because every single one of the nations that said we support Palestine, first of all, they say the 1967 borders. Well, how are you going to get there? So it's meaningless. I mean, unless Europe said, and we're willing to do everything that's necessary to dismantle the West Bank settlements, to compel Israel to, withdraw to the 1967 borders, it's a meaningless gesture. Two, they all said, yes, Palestine, but Hamas will not be part of the government. Hamas cannot be part of the government. It sort of undermines the whole concept of self-determination as set forth by the United Nations in its charter. Just a second. Right before the show, something flew right in my eye. So it's wedged in there someplace. The self-determination. So, if there was an election today in, where Palestinians live, Hamas would win. I mean, the Palestinian Authority of Mahmoud Abbas has no legitimacy. It's seen, rightly so, as having sold out to Israel a long time ago. Fatah is an empty movement. The only Palestinian party that believes in an independent Palestine, is willing to fight for an independent Palestine, is Hamas. And yet the will of the Palestinian people will not be respected, is not being respected, because in Gaza they have voted and Hamas won the vote. So these are just empty words, meaningless. As for Israel, look, Israel's committing suicide. And if you believe in a Palestinian state, sometimes the best thing to do is just sit back and let Israel do what it's doing, because there's no worst enemy to Israel than Israel is to itself. Sadly, the cost that's associated with this suicide is, measured in tens of thousands of Palestinian lives that are being lost on a daily basis, tragically. Women and children whose remnants of their bodies are literally being scraped off of walls. Disemboweled children. I mean, the photographs are there if people want to see them. If you'd like, there's certain video clips you can listen to where you get to listen to Palestinians scream as they burn to death in the aftermath of the Israeli bombing of the building. The evidence is there. For anybody who pretends that there isn't a genocide taking place, there isn't ethnic cleansing taking place, I have no use for you, literally, because it means that you deliberately deceive yourself, and you're willing to do so in the face of some of the most horrific organized slaughter in modern times. But this is the price that has to be paid for freedom. I remind people that Normandy wasn't liberated, void of civilian casualties. Up to 60,000 French civilians died in the liberation of Normandy in World War II, and civilians die all the time in conflicts. And for the Palestinians to get their freedom, and the only way forward was something that Sinwar noted back in October 7th. Think about what October 7th was. It was not just the ambush of Israel in terms of attacking Israel and inflicting a military defeat on Israel and taking people hostage. But what was the purpose of the defeat and the hostage? It was to lure Israel into Gaza to do what? To be Israel. You see, the Palestinians know the truth about Israel, but it's a truth that the world has been shielded from. The Palestinians know that the Israelis are despicable human beings who don't value human life, who are fully capable of raping Palestinian women repeatedly in order to break them, to get them work for the Israeli secret services, to torture and murder children, to bulldoze homes, to allow settlers to come in and steal the land of people. The Palestinians know full well the racism that exists in the apartheid regime of Israel. But the problem is the Israelis are great. They have great PR. And they've bought Europe and the United States. They own the media establishment. They've bought the politicians. And so Israeli PR is able to be blasted all over the place on the airwaves, on the newspapers, everything. And the average American, average European sees, oh, the Israelis are the good guys. They're just like us. I mean, I think the Israelis, to show you the genius, the evil genius of their propaganda, I think Netanyahu just posed with a poster that said 50 states, one Israel, as if we're the same, as if the 50 American states in Israel, we're the same. They're us, we're them. It's all okay. It's not a big deal. Don't worry about it. But we're not them, and they aren't us. I just want to remind your audience, the Israelis hate Americans. They do. They openly despise us. Why else would they attack the USS Liberty? Why else would they authorize their government to recruit Jonathan Pollard and spy against the United States? Why else would they have their tanks attempt to run over a Marine captain in Beirut in 1983? Why else would they continue to spy on the United States repeatedly? Israel isn't our friends. They're not even close to being our friends. Israel interferes in our democracy more than any other nation in the world. That's not what a friend does. Israel uses the United States because without the United States, Israel can't exist. Israel is a parasite, a literal parasite that has attached itself to the American host. That works so long as the host views the parasite as being harmless, or in the case of Israel, tricking the host into believing the parasite is actually an extension of itself. But what happens when the host wakes up and goes, this parasite isn't not only not me, but it's doing me harm. It's sucking the life juice out of me. Then you seek to expel the parasite. And that can't happen until the host recognizes the evil reality that is Israel. And what Israel is doing right now is showing to the world, showcasing how evil they are. And it's having an impact here in the United States. And this is where Naftali Bennett gets it wrong. Because it's not going to be the world, having your children live in a world where, they call you names. There will not be an Israel when this finishes. The Israeli state will be terminated. It's not that there won't be a Palestinian state. I agree with Naftali, but there won't be a two-state solution. No. Palestine will exist. Israel won't. Israel is finished. It's done. The world cannot tolerate Israel as it currently exists, and the world is turning away from it. And we start to see this in incremental fashion, with Europe starting to recognize this notion of a Palestinian state. But the real damage will come when the United States turns its back on Israel, and we're starting to see movement there. Now, the question is, will there be any Palestinians left when this is finished? The bad news is Israel's just killing them off in huge numbers. I mean, even the Israelis have to acknowledge that the harm they've done, that the data that's coming out from Palestine is significant, and the vast majority of the people being killed are civilians. But the other reality is Israel can't win this war. I mean, as we speak, the IDF is being slaughtered, butchered in Gaza, in occupied Gaza. And it's just going to get worse. I mean, we are talking, the Hamas fighters are underground. They're dug in. They know the terrain. Israel's moving in. They can temporarily occupy space above the ground, until which time Hamas fighters emerge, put a mine on. And every day you read about, an entire tank crew consumed by fire after an explosion. And the death toll is just mounting over and over and over again. All these Israelis that took photographs in the early days of the war of them, doing this, that, or other thing in Gaza are now dying, because death will catch up to every single one of the Israeli occupiers should they opt to remain in Gaza. Death is the only solution, death or retreating. But Israel will not occupy Gaza. They cannot win the battle in Gaza. And this pipe dream of developing Gaza into some sort of elite, resort land, it's Jared Kushner's wet fantasy, wet dream. It's not going to happen. Gaza is part of Palestine, and the Palestinians have shown they're willing to fight and die for Gaza. And Israel will not win. This is the future. This is the future. Israel's finished. Netanyahu acknowledges the growing isolation of Israel, and he says we will have to learn to live, to be self-sufficient. What a joke. Israel, self-sufficient? Name one thing they're self-sufficient in. They can't produce they have to buy all their weapons from us, or they have to buy the material that goes into the weapons from us. Their economy is totally dependent upon outside investment. Nobody's investing in Israel right now. Nobody can, because Israel's a basket case, basically, a de facto, blockade from the south by the Houthi. Israel's one hope. If you remember back in September, I think of 2023, before October 7th, September 12th, perhaps, Biden was in India and he made a speech about the Indian, Middle East, European economic corridor. And Netanyahu immediately came out and said, this is not an exaggeration, this is one of the most important days in the history of Israel. Now, why? Why would that be one of the most important days? Because if that economic corridor came into being, the concept that was first envisioned in the Abrams Accord of this unified economic system with Israel as the heart, the financial heart, the technology heart of this system, made Israel viable for the first time. Israel could survive on its own because there would be the economic ability to, do what needs to be done without the American taxpayer underwriting this. And Netanyahu recognized the importance of that liberation from the American taxpayer. Most important day in modern Israeli history. That's gone. There is no more Abrams Accord. There is no more Middle East economic corridor. Israel is isolated. And so when Netanyahu says that Israel survive, using its own resources, it will become self-sufficient. What he's really saying is that Israel survive based upon the largesse provided by the American taxpayer. That is a window that is closing. It's not closing overnight, but we see growing animosity, resentment, and opposition to America's continued underwriting of the Israeli nation. And when we decide to stop writing the checks, Israel no longer exists.
Scott, you mentioned the PR of Israelis being dominant somehow. We can argue that among the elites in the West, as Emmanuel Macron said, there is no genocide. He doesn't have the evidence to prove that there is no. But you see people on the street in Italy coming out, huge protests against the foreign policy of Italy vis-a-vis Gaza and Palestine. And this is Meloni. She didn't talk about. She doesn't recognize the state of Palestine. How do you see the difference between the public opinion and the elites, and who's going to have the upper hand in a long run, in your opinion?
Well, as you rightly pointed out, the political elites, are hostage to a global system that Zionism has insinuated itself into. But you're starting to see, why then would political elites in England and in Germany, Spain, Portugal, and elsewhere, why would they break ranks with this system and support something that Zionism doesn't support? It's because they recognize the reality of their constituents and the posture taken by their constituents. That politicians, they love only one thing, and that's staying in power. That's it. They don't believe in anything else. They just believe in staying in power, and they will do whatever it takes to stay in power. Understand that none of these nations, opted to recognize Palestine's, the Palestinian state in the 1967 borders because they're morally they have a moral conscience. No, they had a moral conscience, they would have recognized it a long time ago. They're doing it now because it's politically necessary for them to make this move, because the people on the streets, even though Macron can't say there's a genocide, the people on the streets know damn well there's a genocide. And Meloni will feel the heat as well. I don't think what is happening here is reversible. I think Israel is incapable of changing the world's opinion, because Israel they've gone too far. They've sold themselves out to a political, to their own political elites who have said things that are reprehensible. The things they say about the Palestinians and about Greater Israel and about what Israel can and can't do aren't just words. They're backed by actions of Israel actually carrying out genocide, bombing people whoever they want. Israel has shown itself to be incompatible with international law. They straight up acknowledge that they are accountable to nobody, no law. They will do anything they want. And at some point in time, this makes them incompatible with humanity. And that's where we are right now. We're seeing humanity, the people, recognize the true evil nature of this Israeli enterprise, this Zionist enterprise. And the political elites, because they believe in staying in power, are being compelled to make adjustments in order to appease. But as I said, it's purely words right now. I believe nations when they say they want to hold Israel accountable, when they blockade Israel, when they prevent weapons from being sold to Israel, when they talk about the termination of the Israeli state with the same enthusiasm that they spoke about the termination of Saddam Hussein, or Vladimir Putin. But for now, they continue to have diplomatic relations with Israel. They continue to treat Israel, as a societal norm. Israel isn't. It's an aberration and should be treated as such.
Here is, Scott, what Tom Brock, the U.S. envoy to the Middle East, said about the Israeli position or the situation of Israel in the aftermath of October 7th.
In general, after October 7th, everything has changed in the Middle East, everything. And Bibi Netanyahu will tell you, he's not concerned about borders. He's not concerned about the red line, the blue line, the green line. If he feels that his borders or his people are being threatened, he will go anywhere and do anything. Full stop.
So he just, I don't know what else can he say. It's all about Netanyahu and his decisions. No one else is going to be able to influence him and Israel. So how is that going to help Israel if they go in that direction, in your opinion?
It won't. I'd like to introduce Mr. Thomas Barak to the United Nations and its charter, and the fact that Israel just says it is operating in total independence of the legal justification for its existence. I also want to remind Mr. Barak of the United States Constitution and the Supremacy Clause, because the United Nations Charter was, after all, ratified by the United States Senate. And according to the Supremacy Clause, anytime the United States enters into a treaty like the United Nations Charter that's been ratified by the Senate, it becomes the supreme law of the land. We are bound by it. And yet we will sit by and let Israel openly violate this, which means we stand for nothing. But again, this is at least Barak. You gotta admire the how refreshing it is to have an American diplomat just be straight up honest that we don't care about anything. After all, he did say about the Lebanese army, we don't want them to be strong. We don't want them to be able to defend Lebanon from Israel. We just want them to be able to beat Hezbollah. Okay, well, that means everything he says is a joke. And that's where we're at right now. This is a tragic joke, because normally anybody who took this position that Barak has articulated, it's okay to accurately quantify what Netanyahu believes in. But then it must be immediately followed up by, and of course, America objects to this, and we will reject and oppose all Israeli actions that operate in violation of international law set forth by the United Nations Charter that the United States has ratified, and therefore, through the Supremacy Clause, the United States Constitution is the law of the land. But he didn't. So it just shows that this administration has totally lost touch with who we are and what we are collectively as Americans.
Yeah, it's so tricky the way he's talking about this situation, Scott. But I think the outcome is that no end game is in sight in the case of Israel and Middle East. I don't know how is that going. Donald Trump was somehow, he said that he's going to do something about it, but you don't see anything coming from the administration so far. How, with the case of Charlie Kirk and what we've learned, how is the relationship between Donald Trump and Netanyahu? How do you evaluate that?
I don't know. Sadly, Donald Trump's turned out to be an illusion of the man he wants us to believe he is. I personally believe that he is a moral and intellectual coward. First of all, he's not that smart. He might have innate common sense and New York City real estate business acumen, but about the world we live in, he's as ignorant as the day is long. I mean, how many times can you sit there and misidentify Armenia without acknowledging you couldn't even point where Armenia is on the map, let alone describe the complexities of the Armenian-Azerbaijani relationship? Nagorno-Karabakh. Let's talk about that. He doesn't know what it is. He doesn't know anything. So the Zangezur corridor, talk about that. He can't. Only superficially, without any. So we're dealing with an intellectual lightweight. That doesn't necessarily mean you're weak. Sometimes the less you think, the stronger you can be, because you only know one thing: brute force. But Donald Trump doesn't know brute force in the traditional sense of the word. Brute force is brute force. It's not bullying. And Donald Trump is just a bully. Donald Trump will never stand up to anybody who stands up to him. This is why we see he strikes, even when he takes a so-called decisive military strike against Iran. It was done negotiated as part of a, complex series of agreements reached to bring about a ceasefire that Israel demanded because they lost the war. We now know this to be the case. We know Israel begged Donald Trump to intervene on a ceasefire because they couldn't sustain this conflict. Iran agreed because they had taken some heavy hits. But the Iran today is in a far stronger position. And Donald Trump will not stand up to this Iran because we can't afford the price that will be paid. Venezuela, he bombs fishing boats and calls it a great victory. Let's see how the Venezuelan government reacts. If it shows weakness, it's doomed. It's finished. You show strength, Donald Trump will back down. He isn't going to do anything against Russia because Russia will do something against him. He won't do anything against China because China will do something against him. Anytime somebody stands up to Donald Trump, he falls like a house of cards. Israel is the easiest problem in the world to solve, but you have to be decisive. I could solve Israel today, right now, if I were the president of the United States. I would sign an executive order that finds AIPAC to be a foreign agent, and all any Jewish American organization that has a relationship with Israel must immediately register as a foreign agent. I would send U.S. Marshals in and shut them all down. I would seize their bank accounts, seize their money, seize the private money of anybody who does business with Israel. I would immediately close down the Israeli embassy and arrest every Israeli diplomat as a foreign agent and put them in a concentration camp. Not the kind that kills people, but the kind that we do anytime there's a war. You always arrest the people and put them in. It'd be a nice little federal prison. They could sit there and play ping pong and volleyball and all that stuff, live in comfort, watch TV. But no, they're done. And any Israeli that resists dies instantaneously. All the Israeli agents out here would be arrested. If they resist, they die. And I would tell the Israeli government that we're stopping all coordination, cooperation with you. We're shutting you down unless you agree to our terms. They would have no choice. People say, well, you could be assassinated. Not really. Not if you lie. Not if you strike first. And the way you strike first is anybody in the U.S. government that has a relationship with Israel gets arrested. It's a crime. And we do that all the time. We arrest people who commit espionage on behalf of China, Russia, Iran. Everybody who has this relationship with Israel now where they freely pass classified information is committing espionage. They're spies. Shut it down. Shut it all down. Make Israel the illegal enterprise that it is. But the president won't do that because he's a coward. He's a coward. And if you don't act decisively, because Israel has insinuated itself so thoroughly in the American fabric, then you pay political price. Then you find yourself being sniped at, boom, 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 and you open the door to somebody putting a bullet in your head. Okay, but if we acknowledge Israel to be the enemy it is, because Israel is an enemy of the United States in every way, shape, or form. It certainly isn't a friend of free speech. If you believe in free speech, you let people speak freely. And if you haven't done anything wrong, you have a better idea, you have nothing to fear. If people want to engage in a debate and a dialogue, you do so. And if you have the better ideas, you prevail. Look at Charlie Kirk. First of all, let me preface this. I probably shouldn't, but I'm going to. I knew who Charlie Kirk was only because he appears on my, every once in a while when you go through X, you get in one of those video loops where you look at a video, and then when it finishes, it clicks to another one, and you're like, oh, okay, I'll watch this. And next thing you know, you've gone down the rabbit hole, and you've watched like 15 videos in a row, most of which you didn't want to watch. Every once in a while, you get Charlie Kirk demeaning a college audience, and that's what he was good at. He was good at going to colleges, bringing up ignorant college students, and engaging in pseudo debates and exposing their ignorance. It doesn't mean that all college students are ignorant. It doesn't mean that Charlie Kirk wins every debate. It means that the way he was packaged, that's what he did. And I just found it interesting because I disagreed about 90% of what he said. And I always expected college students to do better, but they never did. And I was always curious as to why Charlie Kirk wins his debates. He wins his debate because it's a controlled debate. He's very clever at how he approached this. But needless to say, Charlie Kirk was somebody who started to change his narrative about Israel. He started to question things because, Charlie Kirk's not a stupid individual. Actually, what he does is very clever and requires a great deal of acumen. But the other thing that Charlie Kirk ensured is that he wasn't going to lose a debate, because he would always, the topics would be, he'd shape everything and get into a point where, he could bring forward rhetorical arguments that, overwhelmed his opponent. And if the opponent wasn't totally knowledgeable of every nuance, of every facet of the data that Charlie Kirk brought to bear, then he would, they would get, they would have to submit. But on Israel, you can't explain away genocide. And if you're America First, you can't explain away taxpayer money going to Israel when we need investment here. And people were starting to question. And Charlie Kirk wasn't able to control that line of debate anymore. And so he started to shift, because his whole shtick isn't about debating, because debate, you win some, you lose some. You either are better prepared. His whole shtick was dominating the conversation, and he could no longer dominate the conversation about Israel. And he started to change. Now, I don't know who killed Charlie Kirk. Do you? FBI claims they have a suspect, but I'm not going to sit here and I don't know. I know he's dead. I believe he was murdered. He was murdered violently, and they have a suspect. So regardless of the case they have, due process requires that it goes through the court of law and all this kind of stuff. I don't know what the motivations of this person were. There's a lot of people out there that claim they know. They don't know. They suspect. They believe. But no one knows except the person who actually killed Charlie Kirk. And, if they've got that person, hopefully, through a trial done in accordance with the rule of law, motivation will emerge, and we can bring closure to this. But I'm not going to jump on the bandwagon that said Israel did it, because there's just no evidence that's been put forward yet that sustains that. One can make an argument, and Max Blumenthal in the Gray Zone is, leading the charge on making the argument that the Israeli government wasn't happy with Netanyahu, and that pressure was being brought to bear financially, arm twisting, shouting. If the accounts of what happened in the Hamptons are accurate, that it appears that if they are accurate, that Charlie Kirk was feeling pressure. Did he fear for his life? I don't know. I mean, if he did, he didn't show it, because he was just a sitting duck out there when he died. But what I do know is that his death has impacted free speech in a radical fashion. Two ways. One, it has a chilling effect on people who do public speaking about issues that are unpopular. I mean, I myself have been marked for death by pro-Ukrainian elements. Is there a concern that copycat killers may say now it's time to suppress everybody, especially those who've been marked to death by the Ukrainian government? My positions against Israel, I don't imagine, are popular in Israel today. So if the Israelis are in the business of killing people who publicly oppose them, well, gosh, that puts me in trouble too. I don't lose sleep over it, but I mean, if I said that I wasn't like, gosh, should I really do this outdoor speaking event today, the answer is I think about it, because if somebody wants you killed, they're going to kill you, especially if you just make yourself a sitting duck by standing in the open speaking in an environment that's not secure. That's a chilling effect, because now to secure that environment, not everybody can afford that. So that means now that we've created a price for free speech. Can you afford to create a secure environment to speak? And if that's the case, then you're no longer speaking freely, because there's a price to be paid. The other thing too is the backlash, because now people who proclaim to be, practitioners of free speech are now seeking to suppress the speech of anybody they disagree with, especially if you're pro Charlie Kirk. Anybody who dared, say something bad about Charlie Kirk, is being deplatformed. That's not free speech. Almost criminalized. You have Donald Trump speaking of the criminalization of this. That's not free speech. And so, what's happened with Charlie Kirk is and what's happened surrounding Charlie Kirk's murder is detrimental to the cause of free speech. The last thing it does, even if Israel isn't behind these deaths, just assume that Israel isn't killing people. And again, I want to point out that we have no evidence that Israel is. But the fear that Israel could, because remember, it's not as though Israel doesn't kill people. They assassinate people all the time. It's an intimidating thing. This concept of this Israeli rogue nation, this illegal enterprise out there, Murder Incorporated. That's what they do. They murder people. They commit genocide. And so now if you're the president of the United States and you're already a weak man, and I believe Donald Trump is a fundamentally weak man who has already sold his soul to the Zionist enterprise, which he has done. This Charlie Kirk's dead, and now you've surrounded yourself with people, some of whom are saying Israel did it. Tucker Carlson. What does a weak man do? And I think by watching Donald Trump, we see exactly what a weak man does. But the bottom line is, look, if this was any other nation in the world doing to America what Israel is doing to America, we would have gone to war against them a long time.
Scott, when it comes to Charlie Kirk, many people who are familiar with his recent interviews, and talking about Netanyahu, you see a guy that has no love for Netanyahu and his administration. He didn't show any sort of love for them, any sort of, passion for them. But what is the obsession of Netanyahu with the case of Charlie Kirk? He's coming out and, tweeting and finally publishing a video on his personal YouTube channel addressing that Israel is not behind, that he's not behind the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Because many people are thinking, what is this obsession? Where does it come from?
I mean, superficially, you'd say you complain too much, therefore you must be guilty. I personally, I'm an open-minded. I'm willing to be shown data to convince me otherwise. I don't think Israel killed Charlie Kirk, because Israel gained nothing from killing Charlie Kirk. Nothing at all. If you wanted to beat Charlie Kirk, you remove his money and you work on delegitimizing him, deplatforming him, destroying his image. This is all things Israel's very good at doing. Killing him? No, that's a bridge too far. What Netanyahu fears is, Israel's support amongst the American Jewish population is there. I mean, the American Jews that are against Israel are already against Israel, and the American Jews that are for Israel will forever be for Israel. But the American Jewish population is a very narrow segment of American society. In order to give Zionism a fighting chance to exist in a nation like America that today is going through economic, downturn, and we no longer have infinite resources to give away. People are starting to actually look at money and say it should be invested here in America. Marjorie Taylor Greene is a living example of this. And so we've got one of these unique accidents of history where you have a segment of American conservative population, the Christian Zionists, people who buy into an interpretation of Revelations that basically says we're waiting for the rapture. We're waiting for the world to end. We're waiting for Jesus to come back. And there's a significant percentage of these people, especially in red states. I mean, these are the people that empower Ted Cruz, a United States senator who has said straight up, I joined the Senate so I could serve Israel. Really? I thought it was to serve people of Texas, but silly me. So these are, this is a group of people that's been, historically supporting Israel because it supports their, perverted notion of the end of the world. I just can't imagine voting for a politician who honestly believes that the best thing that could happen is for the world to end. Then just go home and wait for it to end. But if you're a politician, serve the American people, which means you're supposed to try and make the world better for America, better for the American people. And if you believe in God and believe in Jesus and you believe in the scripture, imagine the hubris that says, I have to help God fulfill God's will. I would imagine that if God wanted it done, it's going to get done. And so if the world's supposed to end, it's going to end, whether Ted Cruz wants it to end or not. So you sort of contradict yourself when you say God is all powerful, God is all knowing, God is magnificent, God is this, God is that. And yet I have to run for the United States Senate so I can help God do his thing. Did God ask for your help? No. I mean, it's the stupidity, the inconsistency of this whole argument. But these are the same people that tend to be MAGA people, make America great again. And they've bought into this political notion that, we have to stop, being the world's policeman. We have to stop giving money away to the world. We need to invest in America. We need to do what's good for America again. So now we come to this conflict between MAGA and the Christian Zionists. And Charlie Kirk, I think, was in the midst of that because a lot of the Christian conservative movement that Charlie Kirk appealed to is caught in this intellectual conundrum of Israel, America first, what do we do? And Kirk, because he is an effective communicator, was starting to make inroads into the Christian evangelical community to have people starting to say, I mean, because listen to the people that he had. No, Israel has a right to exist, and we need to support Israel's right to exist. But Israel's a strong country; they can pay for it themselves. We shouldn't be paying them. We should be investing money here. So it wasn't that the people were walking away from Israel; they continued to say, no, we believe in Israel, we support Israel, but we just don't want to send American taxpayer the money. Which means, when you break it down, you're trying to kill Israel. And Netanyahu knows this. He knows this. That's what he's scared of. And so his speech wasn't about truly denying something that Israel did. His speech was to try and tell people, we didn't do it, so don't stop questioning us. Stop buying into this narrative, because the debate that's happening right now, this Israel did it debate, it's undermining Israel's long-term viability because it's eroding support amongst Israel, among the very constituent that Israel has to continue to hold sway over, American evangelical Christian Zionists. They're starting to question this support to Israel and whether supporting Israel is good for America. And if you make America great again, and you suddenly wake up one day and you go, Israel is bad for America, that's a bad day for Israel. And that's what Netanyahu is trying to stop.
That could be understood, Scott, with the PR among the public opinion and young people in the United States, because they felt somehow that in the aftermath of the assassination, they can take over the movement, they can reshape it in favor of Israel. That's why Ben Shapiro went there to the headquarters, to the
You mean the Jewish Zionist who has publicly derided Christianity and Jesus and talked about how bad and evil and feckless Christianity is, suddenly saying that he, a Jewish Zionist, is now going to be the voice of Christianity because we're the same thing. That Ben Shapiro?
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
yeah, exactly what I'm talking about. But Scott, do you feel that Israel going to be able to reshape the movement in favor of Israel in a long run, investing, and I don't know how is that going to be possible? Even because Charlie Kirk, when you look at his character, he was the heart of the movement that he started. Without him, no one else is going to be able to communicate the way he was able to do.
But Charlie Kirk was a cult of personality, to be honest. He was very good at what he did. I will never, as I said, I don't agree with a lot of what Charlie Kirk said. And when I first watched it, I mean, because there's the Jesse Waters, I guess, is a Fox News kind of guy who goes out and humiliates college students on the street. At least he used to, and I found it to be funny. I mean, it just, it's like, come on, man. If you don't know this, but it didn't advance anything other than entertainment. When I first saw Charlie Kirk, doing his college debates, I wrote it off as sort of a more intellectual version of what Jesse Waters is doing, just a higher spectrum of public humiliation of college students. But because Waters, you just know, is farce. I don't take anything Waters does seriously. He's just a walking, talking joke. But Kirk, after a while, you had to look at it and go, actually, he's serious. This isn't farcical. What he's doing is actually very serious. And there's a method to his madness. I mean, there was a whole lot more preparation to Charlie Kirk's college debates than met the eye, at least my interpretation of it, because to give the answers he gave is rehearsed. I mean, he's rehearsed these answers, which means he's leading an audience into an intellectual ambush. Getting their question, then throwing it back, controlling, by responding the way he does, he takes this broad answer and then he narrows it by his response, and then they get sucked into that trap. And then he continues to narrow until he overwhelms you with data and you look stupid. And it happened every single time. And I'm like, whoa, this guy's pretty polished. It's pretty good. But it's a skill set that he mastered, and it can't be replicated. It's like Rush Limbaugh. Nobody's been able to fill Rush Limbaugh's, niche. Nobody will fill Charlie Kirk's niche. And without that, the movement he's created is going to die. Israel isn't going to be able to turn this around. There's no amount of money that Israel can. How much more money does Israel have to pour into this? They already bought everything. They control everything, but you can't control truth. And what we're seeing right now are some harsh truths. Israel is a genocidal state. You can't undo that. No amount of money can change what we see on TV. And Israel is bad for America. No amount of money can change that reality. And so I don't see Israel reversing course. I don't see them succeeding in, this pathetic effort to get Ben Shapiro to come in and take over the bloody microphone of Charlie Kirk. It's going to fail. Israel cannot be saved. The Titanic, once it hit the iceberg, couldn't be saved. You could fake it for a while, but it's going down. Israel has hit the iceberg. They're going down. And no matter what you do right now to try and change the public debate about Israel isn't going to change that reality. The genocidal state of Israel is incompatible with global humanity and incompatible with American values. And the American people are waking up to this. The world is waking up to this. And because Israel won't change, they're going to, submit implies, going back to Thomas Barak, that you bend the knee. Submission can be obtained other ways too, like beheading. It's the final submission. Israel isn't going to bend a knee. That I agree. If you don't think Israel is going to be beheaded, think again. It's finished. This illegal enterprise we call Zionism is finished. And you see it through every act of desperation that takes place. Everything Israel does today is an act of desperation. It's a bloody act of desperation. It's a tragic act of desperation, but it's an act of desperation. When you have to admit that no law applies to you, because if you ever obey the law, your survival is at risk. You're acknowledging your inherent incompatibility with the norms and values of humankind. And Thomas Barak just condemned Israel by saying that. There are no red lines, blue lines, green lines. There are no lines. There's nothing Israel won't do to survive, which means Israel is inherently incompatible with human life. It's the ultimate parasite. And the ultimate parasite will suffer the fate of all parasites because they can't live without a host. And when the host starts rejecting the parasite, it's all she wrote.
So what's going to be the game changer for Israel out of this desperation? How is that going to change? Because let's assume that the final goal of Israel of attacking Iran again. Here is what we've learned, Scott, about one of the members of the Iran's National Security Commission. He said that the MiG-29 has arrived in Iran. Su-35s are on the way in significant numbers. HQ-9s are coming in volume, and S-400 is already in Iran. They have received S-400. And this guy is talking to the government. What he's talking about is to Iranian media, it's not to international media. And he's talking, why are we so shy in talking this way to the international community, that we are so much prepared for any sort of attack on the part of Israelis? And how do you see that? How do you think that that's still an option for Israel to attack Iran, to change the game, to show that Israel is alone and Iran is the worst enemy? And how do you find that?
At the moment, Israel, even though it's an illegal enterprise, there's still a modicum of rationality behind what Israel does. The fact that you have these acts of desperation implies that Israel knows what should be but isn't, and they're desperate to get it back to what should be. Never forget that Israel begged the United States to bring it into the 12-day war because Israel was losing. What allowed Israel to inflict harm on Iran was perfidy. I mean, America claiming they want to have a negotiation and Iran being lulled into this false sense of complacency. Perfidy on the side of the International Atomic Energy Agency that used the unique access they enjoyed monitoring Iran's nuclear program to share sensitive information about Iranian nuclear scientists, Iranian nuclear programs with nations hostile to Israel, hostile to Iran, who then shared it with Israel, and Israel incorporated their targeting. Perfidy on the part of Iran that not only allows Israel and the United States to maintain massive intelligence programs on their soil to spy on Iran, to, in the case of Israel, to build these complex agents of networks of agents who were empowered to produce drones domestically inside Iran and use those drones to strike Iran, but also to allow Israel to use their airspace to get into the Caspian Sea and strike Tehran from its, unprotected rear. These advantages don't exist anymore. Iran has effectively nullified all of these advantages and shored up potential, weak points that could be exploited by Israel. But Israel hasn't done anything to protect itself, nor is there anything Israel can do to protect itself from the reality of Iran's ballistic missile supremacy. Iran in the 12-day war made heavy use of 20 to 30-year-old missiles early on in the early stages. And these succeeded in absorbing a tremendous amount of the Israeli defensive capabilities, allowing some to get through. But the bottom line is that Iran possesses sufficient quantities of missiles that don't require you to overwhelm the system. They are automatically superior to anything that the system can do to protect itself. And Iran started using these missiles near the tail end of the 12-day war.